Well, Ben, you might feel like you're successful and respected and popular, but the numbers are in, and facts don't care about your feelings. That felt good to say. Hey there, folks! This is, I guess, in some ways, a soft follow-up on the video that I did about the Daily Wire movie that Jonathan Majors is appearing in, and what a absolute garbage fire that was. Check out the video if you haven't already heard about all the nonsense going there, because whatever you think, it's more and it's worse. So, since then, a couple things have happened. One is the Daily Wire underwent layoffs. The Daily Wire underwent serious layoffs. You may have seen a graphic like this floating around on social media claiming that possibly 50% of the company was laid off. I am disinclined to think the number is quite that high, partially because the source for that seems to be Candace Owens, who could tell me the sky is blue, and I would demand a second source before I would believe it. But while we may not know the exact number because the Daily Wire hasn't said, it does appear to be substantial, especially in its Nashville offices. So while we may not know the exact number, that is a lot of people who now have to try and pretty up their resumes in a way that will appeal to the AIs that are now being used to conduct the first round of considerations for any given job position these days. And there's more than that, because there's stuff specific to Ben Shapiro. Because I didn't call him out idly, because to be clear, while he is core to the Daily Wire basically started with him. He is not the CEO. He is not the president. He is the face of the company. But he also has his own thing going. I mean, it's all tied together, but, his own YouTube channel was kind of the backbone of his entire career, such as it is. And the numbers on that thing are not looking healthy. Actually, it's not even a matter of them not looking healthy. They're looking weird. Now, you might have seen some headlines along the line of Ben Shapiro loses 85% of his audience. That is, I'm sure if you picked your data points really carefully, you could justify that number. That's not accurate. Actually, I'd say it probably would have been far more accurate to say Ben Shapiro's numbers on YouTube reflect reality now, as opposed to the padding that there was in them before. I will justify that take in a bit, but let's back up. I mentioned already that this is a little bit of a soft follow-up to the video that I did on the movie, quote unquote, that is, I believe, still in production. I can't confirm that that's wrapped or not. But I asked at the time in that video, why are they even trying to do this again? Because the Daily Wire had tried to make movies work, and it hadn't really gone great for them. I mean, they could kind of say that it had, but the very limited theatrical run of most of these wasn't very promising. Some of them didn't hit any kind of theaters at all and just went straight to the streaming service, where basically the Daily Wire can claim that the streaming numbers for these movies were whatever they want, or hide behind the same kind of vagaries that every streaming service does, which is we're happy with those numbers or some variant thereof, without actually giving hard data because they're not required to. That all having been said, while they would talk up, their various movies and TV series that they had done as being successful, the reality is they were almost definitely not making their money back on those. The only things that were clearly profitable as far as that went were Matt Walsh's quote-unquote documentaries. And that's only because those are a hell of a lot easier to keep control of the budget on, and also they played very directly to the base that the Daily Wire has built up. Whereas when they tried to do stuff like Terror on the Prairie or Shut In or the Pendragon Cycle, those were designed to try and have more mainstream appeal, but the mainstream doesn't want what the Daily Wire is doing, and apparently neither does its own core audience. They want to be pandered to. The Matt Walsh documentaries did actually do that. They were the successful things. Now, as I mentioned in that video, I was kind of surprised that the Jonathan Majors movie was even happening because the previous CEO, Jeremy Boring, had been ousted before that project was announced. And he had been the face of the big push into this kind of creative endeavor. A lot of it actually kind of seemed to be his pet project or his baby. The Pendragon cycle in particular, he directed a whole bunch of the episodes of that and seemed to be a passion project for him. And in regards to Ben and some of the other folks there, a lot of them are ultimately frustrated creatives. They wanted to make it in Hollywood. Hollywood didn't want them, and they decided to start making the stuff themselves when they believed they had the funds to do so. But the returns just weren't there. And you'd have thought that ousting Jeremy Boring as CEO would be the perfect cutoff point to just stop doing that stuff, because it's a money pit. And yet they announced that movie after he was removed, which struck me as odd. Now, at the time I made the previous video, my guess was that the producer of that, Dallas Saunier, who has his own entire history even separate from the Daily Wire, long story short, he was actually sort of building up a decent indie producer career in Texas, and then everything fell apart because one of the producers at his company was accused of some really not good stuff, and a lot of things came out about the working conditions on his sets. And he basically fled to the Daily Wire for the same reason a lot of aspiring creatives flee to organizations like the Daily Wire, which is when you get canceled, the people who are against cancel culture, at least what they claim it is, are kind of the only ones who will take you. And since linking up with the Daily Wire, Saunier has been a producer or executive producer on, I think, every single thing they've made. I suspected he was the one pushing for one more shot at the Daily Wire making a movie. It made sense to me that he would kind of come back pleading, possibly on his hands and knees, begging for one more chance to make this work, because where the heck else is he gonna go? At least anywhere that has a budget worth a dang. But that didn't really explain why the Daily Wire would have agreed to it. That still felt like something I didn't fully have an answer to. Because as much as they might have Hollywood dreams, it should have been clear to them by now that that just wasn't going to happen, and it was just throwing money into a hole. But it makes a little bit more sense now that maybe they were just willing to roll the dice one more time on this entire endeavor because, well, their foundation appears to be crumbling. And when the stuff that you've built your entire company on doesn't feel as firm, well, maybe you're a little bit more willing to throw it all on a big gamble and see if it pays off. Now, this is not even a good version of that. They had been gambling on this and it hadn't paid off, but the reality is the ceiling on a successful movie is pretty high. And the ceiling on what the Daily Wire actually does as its core business appears to not be anywhere near as high as either they thought it was or they wanted it to be. Now, I'm going to talk a fair bit about ceilings for products, for companies, for whatever. And that's a pretty important concept to grasp. So when I say it hit its ceiling, there is a maximum amount that any given product, whatever it be it a physical good, be it a YouTube channel, be it entertainment, be it podcasts, be it whatever. There is a ceiling for the maximum amount that you are going to be able to get as income on a thing. Everything has its natural ceiling. And generally, things hit their ceiling when you have basically reached the entire addressable market for what it is you're doing. You've gotten hold of everyone that you can reasonably get a hold of who might want what you're selling, and they've made their decision to either buy it or not, and you've kind of run out of people to sell to. So how do you keep growing? Well, you branch out into new things. And this is, for the record, part of why mergers happen so dang much. I got to witness this firsthand at the last office job that I had, because when growth is the most important thing, if you've hit the ceiling on what you already make, well, your best bet then is to start making something else until you hit the ceiling on that as well, theoretically, while maintaining the ceiling for the stuff you are already doing. Except you don't want to start from scratch if you can help it. You know what's a great way to get a leg up? Merge with something or buy another company that already has a foot in the door that you think has more growth potential. I think this is probably best exemplified by Disney buying Marvel. At the time that they did that, I think Disney knew that while they probably hadn't hit the ceiling yet on their own films and Pixar and stuff like that, they probably knew they were within sight of the ceiling. Whereas the growth potential on Marvel at the time they got it was huge. So while the movies and the TV series might have started out as like, yeah, we're going to do it as good as Hollywood and like a, screw the supposedly woke people in Hollywood kind of thing, ultimately, I do think it was also a business decision because if they wanted to keep growing, and remember, we live in a culture where being stable is not acceptable. Only growth is success, regardless of whether or not you are actually profitable yet. Hi, AI industry. You actually turned a profit yet? Any of you? Didn't think so. Moving on. So I think that they are hinging a fair bit on that Jonathan Majors movie because they don't have much else left. Even before the layoffs hit, they'd shut down their book division, while their kids' entertainment streaming service, Bent Key, still exists and does still appear to be up and running. So far as I can tell, they haven't added anything new there, and they haven't produced any new original content for it in a while. And they haven't announced new seasons of any of the stuff that they do have on there. And all this has been happening at the same time as they've been bleeding talent. Talent kind of in quotes, but like the camera-facing people. That's the talent, whether you think they actually are talented or not. But Brett Cooper left and is doing fine on her own YouTube channel, basically doing the exact same thing she did for the Daily Wire, only now she keeps more of the money than whatever cut she was getting from them. Candace Owens left and has gone both batshit and also, as far as the numbers go, pretty successful going solo as well. And I think that is another contributing factor to all this. Jose has done some really great breakdowns on some of the difficulties that the Daily Wire has been having lately, but I want to tie this back to Ben Shapiro specifically, because that's the new wrinkle in all of this. Because his channel numbers, what's going on there, Ben? Now, a lot of the data that I am going to be talking about, I'm pulling from a site called Social Blade. If you're not familiar with it, it basically tracks subscriber and viewer numbers for YouTube channels. Here's some of the data they have on my channel. Digging into the stuff on something like Social Blade can actually be really fascinating because you might notice on my own data, see there's that massive drop right there that happened in January of this year. Now, if you're wondering what that is, because it's showing like negative views, that happens when a previously public video is either unlisted, made private, or deleted. And in January of this year, I unlisted all of my stuff reviewing Harry Potter. I left it up before with, just a pinned comment, with my thoughts on J.K. Rowling, but enough had gone on that I'm like, you know what? I don't want these reviews up anymore. I don't like the idea of them just being something somebody could stumble across at this point. I don't feel good about that. So I unlisted all of them, which means all of the views that had accumulated on quite a few videos that I'd made on Harry Potter before it became clear who J.K. Rowling was, all suddenly went away, and there you've got that big drop down. So, as I said, Social Blade can be really interesting, but it's not the view numbers that I want to focus on with Ben. It's the subscriber numbers. Because, Ben? What's going on? This is actually really fascinating because a drop-off in views happens. It can happen for any reason. It can happen for no reason. Sometimes just the algorithm doesn't favor you anymore. That happens to me on a semi-regular basis, to be completely honest. And there are plenty of channels out there where the views on their video don't really feel reflective of the number of subscribers that they have. It is worth noting to people that there are very few channels out there where all of your subscribers watch all or even most of your videos. It's usually significantly lower, especially if you're cranking out stuff on a regular basis. If you're doing like a video every 6 months to a year or so, if you're one of those kinds of YouTubers where like anything you drop is a big event, maybe then your subscriber numbers are directly reflected in your video views. But if you're putting out stuff on a regular basis, and Ben puts out stuff sometimes more than one a day because he takes his longer videos from the Daily Wire and cuts them up into shorter segments and then uploads those. When you're putting out stuff that regularly, the kind of numbers that you want to see is honestly 10 to 30% of your subscriber base. 30% is actually pretty healthy. You want higher than that, but like if that's your average, that's fine. I say anything under 10%, especially if you're getting anything under 10% regularly, that's a point of concern and might be a signal to shift direction or maybe stop doing some of the things that you're doing because they're not working. But even when view numbers drop off, subscriber numbers usually don't. Because, I mean, there's plenty of people who are subscribed to channels they don't really watch anymore. Heck, I'm subscribed to channels I don't really watch anymore. There are creators that I am still subscribed to, and I see their stuff scroll by my feed and go, oh, they made another thing. I don't really feel like watching that. But I also don't bother to go in and actually hit unsubscribe. Most people don't. So when you have a drop-off that is month over month, tens of thousands, that's not just people decided they're not interested in you anymore. Those are the kind of numbers usually associated with a scandal. So like when stuff broke about Illuminati or James Somerton before he deleted his entire channel and then tried to come back and then deleted his entire channel again. Those sorts of things, those sorts of scandals, those can lead to big subscriber drop-offs as people go, oh God, you're gross and I don't ever want to see you again. But that hasn't really happened with Ben. I mean, yeah, there's been generally bad news. He's been dunked on a fair bit lately. Check out NerdSync's video on his Superman review. It's just fully ratioed. Scott's video has more views than Ben's original video, and it's glorious. But that's not going to cost him his viewer base, because I can't imagine there was a lot of crossover between people who like Ben Shapiro and people who like NerdSync. So most people who like Ben Shapiro are going to see something like what Scott did and brush it off and probably never watch it and don't care. So those kinds of dunking videos shouldn't lead to a massive drop-off. And there hasn't really been a scandal that his base would care about. Yeah, there was the nonsense going on with the movie, but he wasn't directly implicated in any of that. And also, I don't think any of the people who actually follow him would care. So what gives? What is the reason for this? Well, there's one other major reason for that kind of drop-off. Clearing out bot accounts. Because YouTube, every now and then, makes a point of trying to purge what are, from its view, dead accounts. Ones that don't really seem to interact with anything anymore. It looks like, oh, this isn't really a valid account anymore. Nobody's using it. Just clear it from the data. And along with that, they also try and clear stuff that looks like it's just bots, accounts created to boost numbers. If you are using a lot of those, and boy, it sure does look like that, especially with this spike of another 40,000 in the middle of the drop-off of everything, which feels like somebody set up a whole new bunch of bot accounts to try and watch Ben's stuff, and then everything tanked again. What it looks like to me is that Ben, or somebody on Ben's behalf, if we're being fair, he runs a company, maybe it was a subordinate, maybe it was a fan, maybe he had no knowledge. It's at least technically possible. But for whatever reason, whoever did it, somebody was padding his numbers. And now the fake accounts that have been used to do that have been purged, which means that, as I said before, it's not really true that Ben lost a whole bunch of his audience. What's true is that the numbers we're seeing now are more reflective of what his audience probably always was. Now, this is not to say that Ben hasn't lost some amount of viewership. He definitely has. You can see that by going to his channel and having it order videos from most to least popular. All of the biggest stuff was from years ago. Looking at his videos starting from the most popular, you have to go 26 videos deep in order to find something that came out more recently than 3 years ago. And that was possibly boosted by the fact that Brett Cooper is on it and in the thumbnail. To find something less than 3 years old where he's the only person on the thumbnail, you have to go 42 videos deep. You need to go 62 videos deep to find anything less than 2 years old, and 113 videos deep before we get something within the last year. And that had to do with Charlie Kirk, which was a big enough story that almost any known pundit was gonna get a big bump from it. In the last year, Ben has only had 6 videos break 1 million views. And for context, that 6 is out of 590 that were uploaded in that amount of time. I mentioned already he sometimes has more than 1 video a day. He is throwing everything at the wall and taking whatever hits he can in the process. This is a completely undisciplined method of going about any of this. And for comparison, let's take a look at Candace Owens, who is vastly outperforming him right now. And she doesn't have to release almost 600 videos a year. Her stuff is actually really far paced out. She seems to be coming at this with a sniper rifle, whereas Ben is coming at it with a flamethrower. Even if we compare Ben to someone with a similar approach to him, like Brett Cooper, it still doesn't look great. Brett Cooper also releases a heck of a lot of stuff pretty quickly, and while her best performing stuff doesn't match Ben's best performing stuff, her worst performing stuff is way better than his worst performing stuff. Her ceiling is lower, but her floor is a lot higher. And honestly, that is a stronger sign of a healthy channel when your worst performing video isn't that far off from your best performing one. The gap currently between Ben's best performing stuff and his worst performing stuff is the frickin' Grand Canyon. With all this in play, it's not exactly a shock that his numbers appeared pretty dang padded. And it's reflective of more than just a flailing channel. It kind of speaks to the ideology behind what Ben does in the first place. It's actually really important, both for folks who make a living on YouTube and for folks on the right, to appear popular, beloved, successful, and agreed with. This is, yes, part of being a content creator. You want to appear as successful as possible. Success tends to beget more success, especially if you are ever out there looking for people to try and financially back anything you're doing. You want to be able to point to successful numbers. But it's even more so the case for the right, because, to be blunt about it, their ideas aren't popular. But it's very important for them to do everything they can to make it look like they are. This is why the right has long held onto the myth of the silent majority. Whenever the polls, the numbers, the voting, the statistics, every available data point says people don't actually like your ideas, they claim, oh, no, they do, but it's a silent majority. The people who agree with us aren't picked up in your little polls and numbers. And look, polling isn't perfect. I'm never going to claim that it is. But that myth is very key to them. Now, if you're wondering why the left doesn't tend to put as much emphasis on being the voice of a silent majority, it's because, generally speaking, specifics and individuals will vary, but generally speaking, the left tends to push the merit of its ideas and say, this is a good idea. But when one side is going, hey, healthcare should be a right and everyone should have access to it and should be able to go to the hospital to get something taken care of without going into debt that ruins their entire life, it's hard to argue against that and not lean on the idea of, oh, well, lots of Americans don't want that. Even though actually on the issue of healthcare, they can't really use that one anymore because it turns out most Americans do want that, but I digress. It's also why they tend to do another thing, which is talk about people's concerns over something. That's a phrase you'll hear if you've ever heard folks on the right, be they pundits or politicians, talk about things like crime rates or voter fraud. Now, some of them will be so blatant as to just lie and make stuff up. But if they're not quite that blatant, then a very common phrase you'll hear is, there is a lot of concern. People feel less safe. People are worried about the stability and security of the ballot box.
People don't feel safe in their neighborhoods.
And the majority of Americans don't feel safe.
The vast majority of Americans today do not feel safe.
Because if they actually dealt with reality, which is that crime is down, pretty much across the board and has been declining for a while. And voter fraud almost never happens. And in the instances where it's been found, it has never been found even vaguely to have anywhere close to the kind of proliferation that it would need to actually swing an election, even a local one. But if they can't deal with reality, because reality doesn't back up and justify the things they want to do, like make it harder to vote and take away civil liberties, well, then they address people's concerns. Because if you don't want to deal with reality, it's real easy to make people concerned about a thing, even if that thing isn't real. You can make people worried about the integrity of the ballot box by just talking about it over and over and over again. You can make people feel like crime is on the rise by talking about specific crimes and avoiding the larger trends. Just talking about cities like, oh, these people feel unsafe. And you spread that toxicity. The image is everything. And the numbers matter. If not in hard data, at least the implication of the numbers. You have to imply that the problem is widespread and that most people agree with you. And that bleeds over to someone like Ben, who is not a politician, to be clear, but has a very strong interest in the political state and future of this country. And it's real important to somebody like that to seem like lots and lots and lots of people, way more than actually do, like and agree with him. Because it should be understood that if you are botting for views and or subscribers and just have a ton of numbers there that are kind of hollow, that's not actually padding your bottom line or your bank account. YouTube has gotten pretty good at detecting a bot view. Bots are designed to do as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and as a general rule, most of them don't sit through an entire video. And this was part of why YouTube started prioritizing the length of time that a viewer watches a video over just the raw number of views, because the view count would count literally anybody clicking on it. And if you got someone to look at something for 1 second and that's a view and you pay it the same as they watch an entire 10-minute video, well, then that's real easy to basically bilk YouTube out of a ton of money that isn't really earned. They've gotten pretty good at picking up on that. So botted views, bot subscribers, it's all optics. It doesn't help you financially. Especially it doesn't help when they get found and purged like it looks like is currently happening to Ben. And I want to be clear, it's kind of a hefty allegation for me to claim that the subscribers that are dropping off are not people unsubscribing, but bots being purged, because that means I am implying some very specific things about what Ben or people on his behalf are doing. But the thing is, there's strong precedent for that. While we talk about YouTube now, the backbone on which the Daily Wire was founded was Facebook. They got huge over there. The thing is, though, that was manipulated. And that's not an accusation on my part. That's a fact. Factually, documented. The Daily Wire skirted a whole bunch of terms of service rules to fake and artificially boost the spread and proliferation of the Daily Wire on Facebook. A lot of it was fake because it was being boosted and pushed by all these other pages that were also owned by the Daily Wire and were not disclosed as being that. So they artificially spread stuff far further than it would have gone otherwise. And they were caught doing it and basically faced no meaningful consequences for that. For the record, this is why regulation and actual consequences matter. And yeah, I know Facebook isn't the government, but I would say internal corporate regulation matters as well, because if the benefit that somebody gets for breaking the rules far exceeds what they pay for a penalty, guess what? They're going to break the rules. Yeah. Sorry, my frustration with the state of this country kind of spilled over there for a second. Circling back. This is something the Daily Wire has done. And actually, I say its foundation's crumbling. Its foundation kind of crumbled a bit ago because Facebook stopped being a viable backbone for their business. Facebook has been given over to AI slop, and there really isn't room for any legitimate business anymore to have that as its foundation. They still have a presence on Facebook. Sure, so do I. So what? You can't meaningfully build much of a business there anymore if you're trying to be an actual business as opposed to a scam. And you can argue the Daily Wire is a scam, but I would say that they are still pushing an actual product, that being the thoughts and ideas that they put forward, as scummy as they are. But the Daily Wire is also in a little bit of a bind because they have tried very hard over the years to present themselves as reasonable, as thoughtful, as considered, as logical. That's why Ben's catchphrase was "Facts don't care about your feelings." He was the logical guy. And this was not just to try and dunk on the left and claim that the left were emotional idiots, but also to distinguish the Daily Wire from things like InfoWars. A side note, if you're not following Tim Heidecker and the folks at The Onion and what they're doing with InfoWars, it's beautiful. I highly recommend giving it a look. It's good stuff.
All right. I can't wait to see it.
But they didn't want to be Alex Jones. The thing is, though, there might have actually been more money in being Alex Jones. Because the thing about Alex Jones, as disgusting a human being as he is and has been, there is also one thing that he undoubtedly is. He's a hell of a salesman.
We got to fund this operation. We got the very best nutraceuticals out there. I don't know if I can run this for another week or so. We want to run it through the end of the month, but that's like 11 days.
I worked in sales for 9 years. I saw guys like Alex Jones. And the thing was, they got good results. They got good numbers. They did the hard sell. They did the harsh push. They got the results. And if you were uncomfortable being that guy, you just had to settle for not being as praised and as successful as that. And I think the Daily Wire didn't want to be him. They didn't want to scream about chemicals in the water that turn the frickin' frogs gay and then immediately have to 180 to pitch a nutraceutical. Like, yes, the Daily Wire has had its little boutique merchandise, its chocolates and its weird plushies and stuff, but it doesn't do the hard sell the way Alex Jones does. Because Alex Jones's entire thing was make people afraid. Tell them that there's poison in the water. There's poison in the food. You can't trust the pharmaceutical industry. Here, I'll sell you something that you can trust. The Daily Wire didn't seem to be willing to do that. And it seems very strange to be basically implying the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro have some degree of integrity. But if you're going to compare them to Alex Jones, yeah, they did and do. They have a little bit more than that. But the thing is, I think the ceiling on what Alex Jones did was probably higher. I mean, until he overstepped and it all got stripped away from him. Yay. But as I said before, I think the Daily Wire hit their ceiling, and I think they didn't hit their ceiling recently. I think they hit it a while ago. I think they realistically probably hit it right when they launched Daily Wire Plus and announced BentKey. And I think they thought that those things would be what pushed them past their current ceiling for their current model of what they did. But those didn't pay off. That's why they have to do the layoffs. That's why everything's dropping. It's not just a matter of you hit your ceiling. They might have also hit a peak, because what they decided to try and diversify themselves into doing was stuff that their base didn't want, and anyone who isn't their base doesn't really want anything from them. This is probably also part of the reason why they were saying, oh, we think maybe Fox News is interested in buying us. I doubt that Fox was ever actually interested in buying them, but boy, would they have loved it. The Daily Wire would have been so happy if they could have convinced Fox to be interested in buying them. But I definitely don't think that's going to happen now. You don't lay off that many people and go, "Oh, we're a good, healthy business. Don't you want to buy us?" That's not going to work. These tactics did work for a time, but you can only fluff numbers so much. You can only pretend like you are huge and successful and popular when you're not for so long before reality catches up with you. It would have been nice to see reality catch up a little bit sooner than it did. And I'm also not going to pretend that Ben Shapiro's channel is like dead in the water. When he covers topics that are like really current hot button items that are like recently in the news things, his videos still do pretty decently when he talks about things like a Supreme Court decision or the assassination attempt on Trump and stuff like that. But whenever he's talking about the broader conservative philosophical concepts, or he's digging around and having to settle for lesser known stories to talk about, the numbers are way down. People will come by to hear him talk about specific stuff that they knew about and they want to get his perspective on. But just like hearing his thoughts, in the broad strokes, nah, man, doesn't look like anybody wants that. Because that 15 to 20,000 view range, that's indicative of the people who will happily hear him talk about literally anything. Then the other ones are his more selective audience, the ones who want to hear him talk about specific things that have recently happened. So I'm not going to pretend that Ben Shapiro is going to go away or the Daily Wire is going to go away. I honestly think the only thing that might kill the Daily Wire is if Ben Shapiro ever leaves, it's dead in the water. But if they continue to bleed talent, but I'm not sure they will. I suspect that there's a reason that the two people who left were both women. I strongly suspect they were being paid significantly less than the guys who are there, and they probably found that out. There's actually reason to believe that might have occurred to them after the whole thing with Steven Crowder happened. Is there a short version of that? Okay, Steven Crowder is an independent right-wing dipshit who had all kinds of problems recently, but right before everything fell apart for him, he had gotten an offer from the Daily Wire that he said was not enough money, and it was a very significant chunk of money, and I suspect far more than Candace Owens or Brett Cooper were being paid. So when Steven Crowder went public with the offer that he turned down, and the two of them went, wait a minute, you're offering this guy that much more than you're paying us and we've been here? I think that's probably why, at the very least, Brett Cooper packed up and left. Candace Owens, it's a little bit more wonky because she was also starting to clash with Ben over Israel. But regardless, I don't think it's coincidental that the two people who left are women. But if the guys start to bail, then they'd be in real trouble. Although I'd be surprised if that happens. I don't want to give credence to the idea that Matt Walsh is intelligent, but I think he might understand his position well enough to know that he is buoyed by the Daily Wire better than he would be on his own. Like, his brand is less about him as a person and a lot more about saying exactly what the Daily Wire audience likes to hear. And if he ever walks away from that audience, they may not follow him. He may be stupid and not realize that. Who knows? But I don't think the Daily Wire is going to go away altogether, or Ben Shapiro is suddenly going to vanish and delete his channel. Would be lovely, but that's not going to happen. But it's still worth pointing out. The numbers are padded, and they're now starting to reflect reality a lot better, and that matters. Because the lie about how popular, how beloved, and how many people agree with them and the ideas that they push is so core to their entire messaging, it takes the wind out of their sails when reality goes, actually, no. While this may not be the end of the Daily Wire or the end of Ben Shapiro, it's a significant punch to the gut and a decent winding, and I love to see it. I just kind of wanted to bring my perspective as also being a YouTuber on, all of it, but also Ben's subscriber numbers in particular, because I was looking at that, seeing the way people were talking about it and going, let me bring some perspective into this. Is this video kind of a little bit of a petty, spiteful, easy one for me? Yeah. I'm on vacation at the time that you're seeing this, so just let me have this. But regardless, Thanks for taking the time and listening to this all the way through. What are your thoughts on it? Whatever they might be, drop something down in the comments. Talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe, they all help as well. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, you are loved. You are the council, and I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lutfula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Snark Shark, Oliver B, Mystic Shadow, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Twylord, Tracy Scrabbit, Paul Barabajoggle, Magdalena, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. Additionally, to thank some folks from the lower tiers of support: Lee and Andy, Gavin Hinden, and I Am Orcus. We have some new friends. We have Peppercorn and where'd the other one go? Where'd you go? Coriander has gone behind my head. They are very young and they haven't been integrated with the other rats yet, but soon. Okay, yes. Maybe you weren't quite camera ready.